what's up, fellas? Band table. Rock on. Hey, who wants to win a motorcycle tonight? Well, one of you just might be the lucky one. The rest of you will lose. I'm just saying, just pointing out. All right, here's the deal. What do wild people do? Wild things. We've been talking about, that'd be a song for us next week. We've been talking about for a few weeks now, people that go wild for God. Okay, so we live in this world where everything's tame, everything's supposed to be all quiet and normal, and if you're respectful of everyone, you're not supposed to say things that, we say and do things that we normally do and stuff like that. But most people don't give away Harleys and give away Volkswagens and pimp people's rides either, so we just kind of do whatever we're supposed to do, right? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. But here's what I'm thinking. The whole deal with being wild for God is a little bit different. Is there something behind me that we can fix that buzzing thing? Is that one of y'all's deals? This large thing here that says Black Line 115 BLX 2. I think it's this one. Can you not hear that? I'm like, come on. He's been playing a few years too long. Bottom right. That's the bottom left. Your other right. Oh, that's better. That's better. Give it up for Flip. Now we know that he cannot hear and he doesn't know his left hand from his right hand. Other than that, hey, by the way, when y'all play later, turn that back on. You might need it. You might need it. Because if I get up here and start talking and I don't have a microphone on, I get all these interesting signs from the back of the room. So you don't want any of those. Anyway, if you're going to be wild for God, which kind of is what we're doing tonight, because that's just what we do. I want to tell you that wild people for God, we talked about it already, they will go places that most normal people won't go. How many of you got up this morning and your goal was just to be normal? Anybody? Some of you are like, I just want to be like everybody else. I want to fit in. I don't want anybody to notice me. I just want to be like everybody else. You know what God calls you to? To be different. He calls you almost to be weird in this world in which we live. He calls you to be that person that when everybody else sits back and says, no, nobody can do that, you're the one that's supposed to be just ridiculous enough to go, oh, yes, God can. Man, nobody could ever make that happen. You're right, but God can make that happen. And he calls us as wild people for God. Y'all with me here on the front row? Because y'all sat way too close tonight, didn't you? Right now you're thinking, dang, what in the world? But to be wild for God, he calls us to go places that most people won't go. He calls us to say things that most people won't say. We talked about last week the life of Stephen. And Stephen stood before all these big, huge leaders of the time that could kill him, and eventually did, but that's not really the point. And they asked him, hey, are you guilty of this? What's the real story? And he just started blurting out the scripture and told people about Jesus. Why? Because he was just crazy enough and just wild enough to say things most people wouldn't say. You know, in your life, when you become that type of person, because a lot of us want to be known for doing things people won't do, saying things people won't say, and going places that other people won't go. We just don't have God involved in it. We just want to be known for being wild. And we do all the different things and all the crazy things, and we want to make sure that everybody notices us because we're different from everybody else. You know what the cool part is? God calls you to that. But he calls you that according to his plan. And he calls you to be so radically ridiculous for him that everybody notices you. And everybody pays attention to you. And they walk up to you and go, man, you're different. What's the real deal? You're crazy. What's the real story behind that? You know what? You're just borderline idiot. What's the real deal behind that? I'd love to hear that someday, which I have. Actually, it was, dude, you're an idiot. Is there something behind that? But that's the other deal. But God calls us to live a life that's above that. Last week, this is our final week. I don't know if you know or not, but we're going to give this away in a minute. Anybody remember? Yeah. Y'all had forgotten completely? But this is our last week of the series. But here's the deal. People that are on fire and wild for God will do things that most people won't do. And that means go places. That means say things. That means be things. All of these things are wrapped up in a person that's on fire for God and doesn't care about anything but God will do things that most people won't do. How many of you ever heard the story of a guy named Noah? Anybody know what Noah did? Built an ark. What the heck's an ark? A boat. How big of a boat? Hugely big. Check it out, Genesis 6, 13 and 14. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. Which is not something you want to hear, really. And it says, yes, I will wipe them all out along with the earth. Build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls throughout its interior. God came to Noah. Do you know what it had never done at that point? It had never rained before. And God comes to Noah and says, I'm going to bring a flood, and you're going to need a really big boat to survive it. And he says, what you need to do is you need to go build this boat. And then right after that passage, it begins to give him detail after detail of how to build that specific boat. What did he do when God told him that? He built him a boat, didn't he? Number two, last week we talked about a guy named Peter. What did he do that we talked about? Walked on water. Peter says in the scripture, Matthew 14, it says, Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. Yes, we talked about the fact that he sank. We talked about the fact that Jesus had to save him. But the key is he got out of that boat. And we talked about the fact that in our lives, sometimes God calls us to step out of boats that we think are all comfortable. And we think are all nice and fancy, and we got the big boat. You know, we got that family barge and all this kind of stuff. And God says, hey, step out of that. And we think, ooh, see, that's water. And I'm comfortable here. I got everything I need right here. Got my diet beverage in the fridge. I got everything going on. Why would I want to jump out there? And God says, because I asked you to jump out there. People that are wild for God, and this is, some of you are going to be introduced to God tonight for the first time. And you're still in that mindset of, I don't even know this God thing you're talking about, and I'm just here to check it out. That's great. Because we love having you here because we want you to understand, number one, God loves you and he has a really huge plan for your life. And number two, once you give your life to Christ, these are the kind of things that happen. Once you go wild for God, these are the kind of ridiculous things that you start doing. And then you won't look at the rest of us all the time and go, man, those people are just crazy. You'll understand why we're that crazy. Because we don't act like we're not crazy. We just want you to know why. Peter got out of the boat and began walking on water towards Jesus. Why? Because Jesus told him to. Number three thing, Mark chapter 1, verse 16 to 18 says this, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once, they left their nets and followed him. Jesus walks up to guys that are working, that are fishing for a living, and he says, guys, here's the deal. You need to come follow me. What do you see happen right after that? They did. How many questions did they ask first? How many uh-oh moments did they have where they said, well, Jesus, that's a great idea, but tell me how you're going to handle this and 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 this. How many of those did they have? Why? Because why? Yeah, I didn't hear none of that. Because here's the deal. Jesus said, let's go, and they went. Right after that, he goes up to a number more disciples and said, it's time to follow me. Put down your nets. And they put down their nets, and they followed him. I want you to understand something tonight. People that are wild for God will do things that most people won't do. And you know what? I want to be in that category. I want to be on that list where if God needs something ridiculous done, he'll call me. Because he knows I'm just crazy enough to try to pull that off. You know, I can see God up there needing something crazy done and looking at our crowd and going, no, that guy won't do it. Oh, no, he won't. Oh, there's the guy that'll do it. That's the guy we want to be. We don't want to be the guy that he looks at the table and goes, okay, you'll do. We want to be the guy that he picks. Because we're the people that are wild enough for him to do whatever in the world he says do. Is that Dave Henderson? Dave Henderson's an example. He'll do anything in the world for God right there. You need to know some stories. You chat with that dude right after that. You know what? You want to be that guy. And I want to tell you, when God walks up to you and says, hey, drop it and follow me, there are some things he expects in that. Number one, wild men for God. And you know we talk about men all the time, but it's about all of us. It's about people that are 10 years old, 20 years old, 60 years old, all the way through, men, women, whatever, people that are going to be wild for God, do certain things for God. Number one, wild people for God do what God says immediately. When Jesus said, Peter, get out of the boat, Peter got out of the boat. I wouldn't say that it took him an hour. You know, I wouldn't say that Peter was in there going, you know, let me stick my foot in and see what the temperature of the water is. I don't think he had that. I think it was now, get out of the boat and come walk toward me. When those disciples were standing there and he walked up and Jesus walked up and says, hey guys, follow me. At some point, one of them did say, hey, can we go? There was a follower with Jesus, and they said, can we go deal with this first? And they said, no, it's time to go. And they dropped it and went. Let me ask you this. When you ask your children to clean up their room, y'all too, huh? Yeah, I get all that. When you ask them to clean up their room, if your child looks at you and says, I'll do that later, what does that mean to you? I love it. I don't think so. You know what? Here's the deal. One day, one of your sons is going to come to my house and want to date one of my daughters. And after we go through the process of me seeing their checkbook and making sure they've got enough money, because trust me, when I give my daughter away, gone, baby. You're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay forever. But here's the deal. When I tell your child, because he's taking my child to the Sonic, which is the only place she'll ever go on a date. When I tell them, you be home by 7, and he brings her back at 8, yeah. Here's the deal. He's going to look at me and go, hey, I brought her home, because I know you kids. That's his attitude. I brought her home. But you know what? He didn't do what he was supposed to do because he was supposed to be there at 7. When you tell God, sure, I'll do whatever you say do, but I'm not going to do it yet, you've just told God you're not going to do what he wants you to do. And my questions are things like, what has God already asked you to do that you've said, I'll get to that later? Because immediately is the only way you can obey God. Delayed obedience is what? Disobedience. When I tell my child to go clean her room and she says, I'll get to it later, she has not obeyed me. She has not, because she cleans it 2 hours late, doesn't then get to come in and go, I did what you told me to do. No, ma'am, you didn't. Because you did part of what I told you to do. And what God says, if you're going to be wild for me, what I say goes now. And I challenge you with that. What is it in your life right now that God has already called you to do? Some of you are at the point where God's calling you into a relationship with him, and you've not even started that relationship yet, and you're putting that off because later you'll take care of that business. Some of you God has said, move here, go here, do this different, give this up, start one of these, stop one of these. And you've said, not quite yet, God. And you know what you've done? You've said to God, listen, I'm not wild for you yet. I'll be wild for you when it's more convenient for me. Number one thing wild people do for God is they follow him and do what he says immediately. Number two, wild people do what God says without concern for surrounding circumstances. I asked you this earlier, but you recognize that when Noah had to build that ark, it had never rained. Can you imagine his neighbors? Hey, dude, what you building? Well, say I'm going to build an ark because it's going to flood. Really? Really? You know, it's never done that before. Yeah, I know, but that's what God told me to do. Really? You know you're an idiot, right? Yeah, I know. Peter, getting out of a boat, walking on water, and the circumstances all around him, the storm coming up, the waves blowing, the wind's blowing like crazy. Yeah, he knows he could go under. Jesus said, get out. He put all that beside him, all that behind him, and said, I'm getting out of the boat because Jesus said to. What does God ask you to do that you've said no to because you know somebody around you, some situation around you can't handle? What have you said no to because you don't trust that he can handle this or this or this or this or this, that you can obviously handle all your own? People that are wild for God do what God says immediately, and they do what he says without dealing with the surrounding circumstances. But God, if I do that, I can't pay for this. You know what? God can. If I do that, I won't know this. If I do that, I won't be here for this. If I do that, I won't be. You know what? God doesn't care about all that. When God says go build something, you go build it. And don't be concerned about the surrounding circumstances. Why? Because he built you, and he knows your circumstances. And he's not asking you to do something that is outside his power to get it done in you. But if you want to be wild for him, do what he says do, and don't be concerned with what you see around you that could be difficult. Because you know what? If you're Noah and you're looking around the situation, you're like, dude, first of all, I don't even have any wood. Second, I've never built a boat. And third, by the way, God, it's never rained. So the circumstances say to him, there's no need for this big boat. But God said, build it, and he did. What do you got going in your life that you're supposed to be doing that you're not because you're looking at the circumstances? Number 3, wild men do what God says no matter what other people say. Wow. Check out this scripture passage. It says this in Galatians 1:10. Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. Let me ask you this, and you don't have to raise your hand, but have you ever not done something because of what someone else was going to think? Something that God has called you to do, and you know it's something God's called you to do, and you're thinking, man, if I do that, people are going to think I'm crazy. You know what? People that are wild for God do what God says do anyway. People that are wild for God, that are all about being everything God wants them to be, they're going to be willing to step up and do things and say things and be things and go places that nobody else will go. And you know what? They're going to get ridiculed for it a lot. You remember some of the times we did the Pimp My Ride series. And y'all didn't hear any of the phone calls, but I talked about a few of those. We got phone calls, we got email. I can't believe you'd put the word pimp on a billboard. We got our picture in the newspaper. It was quite the artistic design. We saved it, by the way. We have a copy. Publicity. Any publicity is good publicity. But you know what? Why did we do that? Because we felt like we had to call it that and do that in order to get those people in here. And by the way, some of them are in here, and they've given their lives to Jesus because we were willing to stick our neck out there and do what we were supposed to do. And you know what? That's what God calls you to do. And some of you are living these lives in your little bubble there that it's all perfect and everything's kind of quiet and nice and nobody ever bugs you and messes with you. And God says, hey, get out of your bubble. No, I don't think so. Hey, step out of your comfort zone. Ooh, I don't believe I need to do that. Hey, step out there where you don't know if you can make a living. Oh, I got a pretty good job here. I don't believe that's God's will for me. God says, follow me immediately. God says, follow me and don't worry about the circumstances. You hear me? God says, follow me and blow the heck off what everybody else is going to say about it. Because he doesn't call you to do certain things according to what your friends and your family are going to tell you about it. He didn't call these guys to live in a way that pleased men. He called them to live in a way that pleased him. And if you live your life according to his plan, you're going to please him, and everybody else will be okay. You want to be wild for God, you do things and not worry about what other people say. Last thing is this. Number 4, wild men give their lives over to God and trust him for the results. You know, I couldn't think of anything wilder than that. In this world that we live in today, I can't think of anything crazier than that, to say to someone, to say to God, listen, you can have my life and you do anything you want with my life. and I'll just trust you for it. That's crazy, isn't it? And you go on television and start talking about that kind of stuff, and they think you're a freak. Because why? Because our world is not built to accept that. Our world teaches us we got to be in control, we got to have enough money to retire on, we got to have enough of this, we got to have our 401k set up perfectly so we'll all be okay, and God can, do whatever, but we can take care of ourselves. The world teaches us to make sure that we cover us. We make sure we are top priority. And God says, you want to really be wild for me? Give me total control. And I'll take care of everything from this point forward. I want you to understand that tonight because it's very clear to us. The wildest thing in life is to stand up and give your life to Jesus Christ. Totally. Without any reservation. Why is that? John chapter 3, verse 16. You've seen it millions of times. Probably it says this. It'll be on the screen. For God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. See, here's the deal. God sent his Son to die on a cross for me and you and our mistakes. The ways that you've messed up today, I know none of you have. I've messed up today. And the ways that I mess up, God sent his Son, Jesus Christ, to die for those. And the most amazing part is then he just throws it out there and says, hey, drop what you're doing and come follow me. But we live in this world where we've been told what I'm doing is more important than what he's doing. What I'm doing is top priority. What I'm doing couldn't be done without me. The job I have is the most important job in the company. And they couldn't do it if I left it and went and did what God said do. God says he sent his Son to die on the cross so that me and you could have a personal one-on-one relationship with him. And we don't accept that. And we don't live that out because we don't really trust that it's all that. And the wildest thing you can ever do with your life is to step up and say, you know what, I'm going to give my life to Jesus and leave every other answer to him. That's the craziest thing you can ever do. You go out in some room, if you came up here tonight and put on a blindfold and just trusted some of us to lead you around. Number one, in this room, I wouldn't trust any of us. But that's beside the point. But you know what I'm saying? That's the most trusting thing you can do, is to trust someone with every decision. That's the wildest thing you can do. And what God says, if you want to be for me, if you want to be wild for me, you trust me with everything. How in the world do you do that? Romans 10, 9 and 10 through 13, or 9 through 10 and 13 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. For it's by believing in your heart that you are made right with God, and it is by confessing with your mouth that you're saved. And then in 13, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. I just want you to hear it from me tonight. Some of you may be here for the first time ever. You might have come here for a motorcycle, and you're thinking, dude, if this dude shut up and give that motorcycle away, I'd go home and be fine. But the key to what we do is that we want to connect you with the God that has a plan for you. And if we don't do that, we can give away motorcycles all day long, but we've not done what God's called us to do. And I'm telling you tonight, the biggest thing you can ever do with your life is to what it says right there, call on the name of God. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. What does saved mean? It means you have a personal relationship with Jesus. Saved means that when you leave this planet, you spend eternity in a place called heaven, instead of eternity in a place separated from God called hell. That's what saved means. That's why they use that term, because it's a churchy term and we get that. But the key is that you are being taken from one future and one eternity to a different eternity because you give your life to Jesus Christ, period. And my question is, we asked that question earlier, what has God asked you to do that you've not done because you're putting him off? What has God asked you to do that you've not done because you don't know what other people will think? What has God asked you to do that you've not done because of the circumstances around you? Let me ask you this question. Has God called you to give your life to him totally, completely, 100%, and you've put that off? Is that the case? You don't need to scream out loud and say, oh yeah, me. I just want to know. I just want you to answer that question for yourself. Is this something that God's called you to do and you've said no? You've said wait. You've said, you know what, I'm young. Once I get older, once I get married, once I have children, blah, 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 then I'll take care of all that. You know what? How does God expect you to follow him when he calls you? Number one, immediately. You follow me? That doesn't mean later. That doesn't mean at home when you get there tonight. That doesn't mean tomorrow morning in your car. That means immediately. That means now. Number two, without concern for surrounding circumstances. Man, if I do this, my friends won't like me anymore. You know what? If you do this, God will take care of you. If I do this, man, I'll probably have to quit my job, and that's where I make my money. You know what? You know who owns your job? God. You know who owns your money before you see it in your paycheck? God. You know if he doesn't give it to you, you don't get it? Because that's who he is. How do you follow him? Immediately, without concern for surrounding situations and circumstances. Number three, not concerned about what other people are going to say. I know people that won't give their lives to Christ because they're scared of what their friends might say. You know, I can tell you what, in this room, I don't know how many people in here, but however many people are in here, you got that many friends. And our goal is to see you give your life to Jesus Christ. It's not to see you win a motorcycle. It's not to build a house this fall. It's not to give away cars. It's not to redo cars. Those aren't our goals. Those are methods to get to this point tonight. When you get a chance and an opportunity to give your life totally to Jesus Christ. What I'm going to ask you to do is just very clear, very simple. We do things a little differently here like we always talk about. But here's the key. What if God right now is telling you, hey, you know what? It's time for me and you to start a relationship. And I want you to do what Jared just said. I want you to immediately. I want you to get over who's around you. I want you to get over what's happening in your life. I want you to get over what people may say. And I want you to give your life to Jesus Christ tonight. And God's calling you. And you're willing to do what it says. And do what it takes to say, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. You know what that means? That means taking you from eternity without him to eternity with him. Because every one of us, when we leave this planet, it's going one of two places. Tonight, here's what I want you to do. If God has called you to that point, if you've got the sweat thing going on and your heart's beating out of your chest, and you don't really understand why, that's okay with us. If you know without a doubt that God's been calling you for years and you've been saying no for years and you've been putting this on the back burner because you're going to get saved and give him your life when you're ready, well, tonight's the night to be ready. If you know he's calling you to do that and you want to give your life over to Jesus tonight and you want to walk the path with us and you want us to help you along with that, you want somebody to come stand beside you and hold on to you and pray with you and walk you through the process of being everything God's called you to be, I want you to stand up with us tonight. That's how we do it. We don't shut on all the lights. We don't turn on some loud music where nobody will notice you. Wild men do what most normal people won't do. And if you want to be wild for Jesus, I want you to stand up and tell us that you want to start a relationship. And all you got to do is stand up right where you are, and we'll have somebody next to you in 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Wouldn't take us 2 minutes, would it, Flip? The silence doesn't scare us. We got time. But here's the deal. I know without doubt somebody came in here tonight looking for a diet beverage and a motorcycle. And God has shown you something new tonight. And he's challenged your heart. And if that's you, I want you to stand up right where you are. And we'll have somebody standing next to you instantly. And we'll help you step into a relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm not going to eye you. I'm not going to sit here and stare at you until you think I'm telling you to get up. That's not my job. I just think God's dealing with some people. And I think tonight's the night you want to start a relationship with him. And we got nothing more important to do than this. Here's the deal, guys. When God calls, he wants immediate. He wants without concern for stuff. He wants without concern for other people. And he wants you to stand up for him. And that's what we're about. What we're going to do to finish up tonight is the band's going to come back and play. Y'all going to play, right? They'll go back into their cage. But here's the deal. I'm serious. As they play, and they're going to play wild and crazy things, and that's cool. You stand up where you are, and we'll meet you face to face. Because you may need a few more minutes. You may need something playing while you stand up. God doesn't call you to slip out the back and make this anonymous. He calls you to stand up for him. So if you want to start that relationship tonight, anytime in this song, anytime tonight, you find us, you stand up, and we'll be next to you. No questions. We'll be there. Hey, did you turn that thing on? That works.